Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Appreciate that, and I want to thank the Chairman and Senator Grassley, Ranking Member, for holding this hearing, and also to our witnesses who are here today to talk about this. I really do appreciate this hearing today. It's given us the chance to dive deeper into the budgetary costs related to climate change, because this is costing billions, if not trillions of dollars a year. Because let's, I think, be clear, the climate crisis is here, it's expensive, and that is just the plain truth. In my home state of Washington, more than 65% of our population lives in coastal areas. And these communities are on the front line of this crisis. We have already seen in my state rising sea levels, increased flooding, and storm surge risk. It does real damage to our working waterfronts, to our community infrastructure, to our housing supply, and the coastal ecosystem that support our fisheries. And we know this will be felt unevenly depending on where you live and what resources you have available. So my first question is for you, Ms. Machado, and thank you for your testimony. Can you talk about the types of investments that your town has already had to make to respond to and prepare for this coastal flooding, and how those assessments are impacting your current infrastructure decisions?
Sure. I think the biggest impact so far has been to our wastewater system. I referenced the wastewater treatment facility upgrade project, which was a $21.7 million project, which may not sound like a lot of money, but our total annual budget is just around $25 million. And the debt service on that debt for that wastewater project is approximately 18% of our annual operating budget, which is considerable. We have recently entered into a public-private partnership with a housing developer to upgrade one of our pump stations. The cost to elevate and refurbish that pump station was right around $4 million. We have 10 pump stations in total, so we have some work still to do. And we are also performing a number of what are called end-of-road retrofits. So we have roads that formerly went to the coast, straight down to the coastline. They're now flooding frequently at high tides. So what we are doing is working with engineers to pull the pavement back from the edge of the road, create kind of a soft barrier to eliminate the erosion that we're seeing. So those are costly projects, and there are many of them. We've completed, I believe, 4, and we have many more to go. So that's just a sample. We have a lot more infrastructure projects that we need to take a look at, and they do significantly impact our budget. It's a budget that is, like I said, very small. We're a small town, just over 11,000 residents, and those residents are already bearing the burden of that cost.
Well, thank you for that. And as an example about how this is actually straining communities in Washington State and the difficult decisions that are having to be made, the Quinault Indian Nation on the Olympic Peninsula in my state has already begun to experience the effects of sea level rise and in those intense storm surges we're seeing. They've had damaging floods and landslides and did a climate vulnerability assessment. And as a result of that, the tribe developed a very comprehensive relocation plan, and it involves relocating the tribe's lower village of Tahola to higher elevation because of the impacts they're seeing. That's going to involve an emergency evacuation center. It's going to move a significant portion of the tribal infrastructure inland away from the Quinault River and the Pacific Ocean that the tribe has always depended on for their sustenance as well. Last year, they did get a $25 million through our bipartisan infrastructure law to begin this costly process, and they are not alone in having to take a really hard look at what the current sea level rise is happening to communities around our country. And I think a lot of people are asking, how are we going to be able to avoid the loss of life and property and be able to make these investments? So, Mr. Eby, my question actually I want to direct to you. Talk to us about the budgetary impacts that such large-scale relocation efforts in the future could have for our communities and for our economy.
Yeah, thank you for your leadership on this subject and for the question, Senator. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, the Quinault Indian Nation is not unique in this situation. The managed retreat that's happening, where they're moving to higher land, and the relocation of critical infrastructure and assets is something that we're seeing in multiple states, and something that has to unfortunately take place when we look at the cost-benefit ratio of staying in certain places and the overall risk that is faced. So unfortunately, as this is not unique, it's extremely costly. When we look at the critical infrastructure that's involved, as I was talking about with Ms. Machard, and what's going on in different counties and states across the state, it is extremely costly to undergo these versus just building in the first place to a standard that allows us to understand what will happen from risk today and into the future. So while unfortunately I can't give you a specific number on how management retreat in these typical situations will cost us as a country, I can tell you that it's much, much more expensive to try and do these things retroactively than to actually manage these things from the beginning and use climate-adjusted forecast to then change building code standards or to make these decisions at the forefront.
Well, thank you very much. And again, Mr. Chairman.